urgent message for all patients on Medicare regarding your eligibility for top-of-the-line braces to alleviate your pain and increase mobility. This is your final notice. If you do not act soon, Medicare will label you ineligible for coverage.
Hi, Mr. Scammer here, and today we're talking about robocalls. You've probably received numerous calls. Robocalls generally are calls that are placed by computer. They have either a facsimile of a voice or somebody's voice that's recorded, and the call asks you to make a particular choice, such as press 1 to get more information or press 2 to discontinue the call and be removed from the call list. Most people are pretty upset by robocalls because you get the calls at times that you actually don't want to receive a call from anybody. That means meal times quite often, times when you're trying to get a number of things done at home, or possibly in the evening while you're watching television and you don't want to miss a baseball game or a particular plot on a show. Many robocalls are fairly legitimate, and they're also quite legal. For example, calls that are made by polling organizations are legal calls, as are calls made by charities, nonprofits. Political calls are also exempt from any laws. But that pretty much is the end of who can make a call legally. The other group, by the way, are people that you might think are essential when it comes to a robocall. For example, receiving a notification from your child's school, or maybe from your dentist's office or from your doctor about an appointment. All of those are robocalls. All of them are things that we welcome, but it's the other calls that we don't like. One thing that we can be sure of, and that is that the Federal Communications Commission and the Federal Trade Commission are coming down very hard on folks who are using robocalls illegally. Telemarketers are no longer permitted, for example, to make calls to people based on prior relationships. So if you had purchased something from a particular company, that company doesn't automatically get the right to make a robocall to you or even a commercial call trying to sell you items. If you have a home landline, then you need to be able to be free of these calls. And as far as callers are concerned, they have to have written prior approval for you to be able to get their calls. Anything beyond that, and the call is illegal. Federal Trade Commission treats calls very seriously. For example, if somebody violates these laws, or in particular the do not call law, a fine is assessed on that company for each call that they make. And there have been some very serious fines assessed. One of those fines was approximately $80 million to a company in Florida that was attempting to reach people about vacation time in Florida. So, as I said, the government takes these very seriously. There also is a limit on when the calls can be placed. For example, if you are eligible to get a robocall, and this could be from one of the exempt organizations or from somebody you've agreed to receive them from, they can only make those calls between 8 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock in the evening. If those calls are made at some other time, they're considered to be illegal, and again, a fine can be assessed. Cell phones. If you have a cell phone, in order for a company to send you robocalls or to make robocalls to you, then you need to provide them with written or oral prior approval. There are a couple things you can do, and one of them is if you add your name to the federal do not call list, you can be assured of something, and that is that anybody calling you and would be violating the law, and it's somebody who would be a scammer. So as you can see, we've provided you with two ways to register for the do not call list. One of them is going to the internet and going to donotcall.gov, where you can register. The other is making a phone call to 888-382-1222, and you can make your registration for that phone on the call itself. Making the call via phone, you can only register the call, the do not call list for that particular phone. So if you have more than one phone, you need to use each phone and make a separate call. Do not call is very effective again. So that's one very good way that you can prevent being taken by scammers in particular who are using robocalls. And as I said, you will know that they are violating the do not call law. Don't answer the call. Second tip, shop around. There are devices that can be purchased either through electronic stores, computer stores, the internet, and those devices can be used to block phone calls. Quite often, those devices are very inexpensive, but keep in mind that the lower the price of the item, quite often the less effective it is, and the more steps that might be required in programming the item. But you can get phone call blockers by going online and searching for them or going into electronic stores. You want to make sure, though, that the particular unit that you're getting is compatible first with the telephone that you have, and secondly, with your telephone or internet service. So if you're using voice over internet, for instance, you have your phone service through something like Comcast or one of the other internet service providers, you want to be sure that whatever device you have is one that will work on that particular service that you have. Next, consider free or low-cost applications that you can download and use them to block unwanted calls. Now, that's quite often what you would do if you have a mobile phone. You want to shop around. You want to read the reviews before you make a purchase because quite often different features are available with different products. So being sure that the app meets your needs, making sure that the price is right, those are all important. You also want to be able to check out the privacy policy of that application and find out how they use your information. Quite often, your information becomes a saleable item to the companies that you're doing business with. In this case, you want to be very sure that the blocking that you use with an app is not going to end up creating more headaches for you. So what can you do? What are the steps that you can take to be certain, or at least somewhat certain, that you're able to protect yourself? Well, explore the features on your telephone. Most mobile phones have a variety of different built-in features that can allow you to block calls. That has basically a double-edged sword to it. For example, if you're receiving a call from the same caller and it keeps coming to you day after day or hour after hour, creating a block on that call using your phone's software becomes a good alternative. But quite often, the scammers are using a variety of phone numbers. They spoof numbers of local businesses, local services, and as a result, you never know what the number is that they're going to use. You can go through and try and block every single phone call, but that becomes kind of a futile effort. But looking at what's available on your phone itself can be very helpful. Next, contact your landline company if you have a landline and ask them about blocking options. Most landline companies provide a variety of services where they can intervene with phone calls that are annoyances. But sometimes those companies also charge a fee for the service that you're getting. So check out the company that you're using as your landline service, find out what the fees are. Also, do a little review and check out whether their service is effective or not. You can do that with an online search. Doesn't take very long. You simply place in the URL line or the address line on your browser the name of your telephone service provider and include the word review or rating, and you'll find out if there are any problems with the company that you're trying to use. So basically, what are the final tips? What are the three major things that you should be concerned about and that you should do? Well, first of all, if you don't recognize the phone number that's calling you, don't answer the phone. Don't answering it is quite often the best way not to be possibly a victim of a scam. Now, scammers are very good at spoofing numbers. So spoofing would be using a local hospital number, local school number, and having that appear on your caller ID. But if you're not expecting a call from the hospital, then simply don't answer the phone. If it's a legitimate call and you have call answering services, then it will go to your answering machine and you can respond very quickly if there's an issue that you need to address. Secondly, if you do happen to pick up the phone, and sadly many of us are kind of hardwired to answer the telephone when it rings. But if you do answer the phone and you have that little bit of a pause and then there's a mechanical voice or what sounds like a pre-recorded voice, hang up. The longer you stay on the phone, the more likely information such as your location, your phone number, and maybe even some personal identity information ends up being transmitted over that phone line. So hang up as soon as you realize that the call is not a legitimate call. Report your experience to the Federal Trade Commission. The FTC is the federal government agency that oversees fraud and scams. And the FCC has a website, which is ftc.gov/complaint, where you can fill out information and file a complaint against a caller that's abusing their rights. Or you can call them at 888-382-1222, and the Federal Trade Commission will log in and capture your information and then use it probably to either intervene with some criminal activity or at least be able to document the number of calls and be able to make some suggestions to the public. So those are some very clear steps that you can take. The final suggestion is that you may want to talk to a volunteer. AARP has a group of trained volunteers who are experts at identifying fraud and can spot and report fraud. So if you call the AARP Fraud Watch hotline, which is 877-908-3360, you'll be able to at least report your problems, maybe get some suggestions on how to deal with them, and at least have that information out there so other people may benefit from it. Robocalls are a pain. We all know that. Some of them are actually very helpful to us, but for the most part, if we follow some very basic steps and some common sense practices, we won't be abused by them and we won't end up being scammed. Thank you. It's Mr. Scammer, and today we're looking at 10 ways that you can avoid becoming a victim of a scam or fraud. There are a number of different things, and I think if you check online and if you are reading the literature that seems to be nonstop, just about every organization has suggestions for what to do in order to avoid becoming a scam victim. Well, AARP and the Federal Trade Commission are no different. We've got some that we think are pretty much surefire approaches to avoiding scams. Number one, it's important to be able to spot and identify scammers, to be able to pick out the imposters. Now, these folks are really good. They will be imposters when it comes to government officials. They will be imposters as commercial operations. Sometimes they'll even take the role of a relative of yours or a friend of yours or even a colleague of yours. So it's important to be able to spot these scammers who are being imposters and are trying to get your confidence in the process of creating the fraud. How do you do it? Well, one way you can do it is be very careful about what information you offer and question the individual who's contacting you. If the contact's by phone, you can take some time to ask questions of that individual. Why are you calling? What's the problem? Where did I meet you? Things like that, which can offset the person who's trying to scam you. It's also important to know that the federal government does not use the telephone to call people. So if you get that call from the Internal Revenue Service, call from Social Security, a call from Medicare, any of those are likely to be scams because the federal government agencies do not use the telephone as a primary means of communication. You'll receive a letter, and the letter will tell you what to do and how to contact them if there's a problem. Secondly, we urge you to do online searches. For example, if you're approached by a company and the company is offering you a really great deal, check out the company online. One way you can do that is simply do a search in your browser. You can also add the word review or rating to the name of the company so that you can see if there's a record of problems. If the contact is made by telephone, you can use the telephone number, enter it into the browser URL, the search line, and quite often, if it's a scam, it will show up in the search results. So be pretty much alert to what you can do online. I know a lot of people don't have access to computers or don't have a strong feeling that they can work with computers, but this is going to be one of the easiest ways to verify whether or not you're being scammed. Number 3, don't believe your caller ID. Criminals have a process called spoofing, and it's the same sort of thing that is done when you have voice over internet, Skype type telephone connections where you can select a phone number. The scammers are good at selecting local phone numbers. They will target a particular area. Let's say they're targeting the area around Rutland, Vermont, and they will use the phone number that is the phone number for Rutland Regional Medical Center. The result is you, as the recipient of the call, believe that the call is coming from the hospital. So don't believe caller ID. As we've said repeatedly, if you get a phone call and you don't recognize the number, don't answer the phone. If you do recognize the number and the phone call is coming at an odd time, don't answer the phone. Let these calls go to your voice recording system on your phone and then listen to the message. Odds are, if this is a scammer, there will be no message left for you. Number 4, don't pay up front when dealing with a promise. Quite often, the scammer, the fraudster, will make an offer to you and ask you to make an upfront payment. The payment may be by credit card, it may be by gift card, it may be by money transfer. Our recommendation is don't make any upfront payments, particularly to people or companies you've never done business with. That's opening the door to possible fraud, and in particular, if you give somebody you don't know your credit card number and other information like that, they can turn around and use that information and commit theft. So don't pay up front when dealing with a promise from somebody. Number 5, consider how you pay. There are a couple hallmarks of the con artist. One of them is they like to get payments by ways that are untraceable. So, for example, if you're approached by a con artist, quite often the con artist will ask you to pay the bill or pay for the service using gift cards. In fact, the IRS fraud calls always will say you can pay for your IRS bill using gift cards. And of course, the federal government doesn't accept gift cards or any other means of temporary payment like that. So consider how you pay, meaning if you're trying to buy a product and you're not sure, first of all, check out the company. But secondly, if you decide to go ahead with the purchase, use something that you can end up pulling back from. In other words, use a credit card. For one thing, a credit card is traceable as far as the transaction, but virtually every credit card provider will make you safe from fraud. In other words, you will not be obligated to pay for any bills that are made under fraudulent pretext. So use a credit card. Don't use a check. Checks can end up being used against you because of the information that's provided on a check. Don't use a money order or a money transfer. For the most part, those are lost funds if they go to a con artist. So you want to be sure that the way you pay, even to reliable companies, is being done in a manner that you can turn back from if you need to change your mind. Number 6, we find that it's really important to talk to somebody. And when we say talk to somebody, it means talk to a friend, talk to law enforcement, talk to a trusted advisor, might be an attorney, an accountant, before you make any commitments online or over the phone. Quite often, the con artist is very interested in getting you to make a decision very quickly. In a way, it's not any different than most salespeople in the legitimate world, because losing a sale can mean difficulty for a company or in particular for a salesperson. So talk to someone before you decide on spending money. That becomes, I think, a very critical point. And as I said, it could be somebody who's a friend, it could be a family member, could be a trusted advisor, it could be a consultant, an expert, but that other opinion can weigh very heavily. Our 7th tip is, as you probably know from other programs, hang up on robocalls. If you get a call and the call is mechanical or it's clearly a recorded voice, hang up. The call is most likely illegal. There's no sense in staying on the line because the longer you're on the line, the more likely you will receive more calls. You're giving that caller the opportunity to record information. So hang up on robocalls. Number 8, be skeptical of anything that's free. Free trials, free products, free goods. Companies don't make money by free. Companies make money by selling. And there's another issue that comes up with free offers. And we've seen a lot of this, and it's not necessarily a scam, but it's kind of deceptive advertising. And that is, you see an advertisement or you see a promotion for something and it's free. All you have to do is sign up for it. And in the process, there's fine print. The fine print says after the free trial or after the receipt of the free item, you're automatically enrolling in a continual sale. In other words, signing up for something free means you have to pay for something else later on. So be very skeptical when you see a free offer. Be skeptical about the money that's being given to you or the product that's being given to you, particularly if you're being offered money to take a trial of a particular product. Number 9, don't deposit any checks in which the sender overpays you or sends you more than what you expected and then requests money back. This is a common tactic by people who commit fraud. Quite often, they will send out checks in excess of the money that is due. For example, I happen to be a justice of the peace. I have a fee of $50 to conduct a wedding. I received a check for $1,850, and the person contracting with me said, "Oh, I made a mistake. I actually sent you the money for the videographer in addition to your money. Please send the money to," and then the person gave me a name and an address to send my money to. It was a fraud. I didn't send money to them, but the intent that they had was that by the time the check cleared that they had given me and bounced, they would have my money and had cashed my check. So anytime somebody sends you in excess of the amount of money due, and it could be something that you're selling online or on an ad in the newspaper, it could be services that you provide. Anytime you get a check in excess of the amount of money that you expected, consider that most likely to be a fraud, and you should probably report that to local law enforcement. Our final tip today is something that we feel very strongly about for everyone. I can come on this program and provide you with tips and hints over a month's period, but the easiest way for you to become aware of what's happening in the scam world is to sign up for the fraud alerts that are done by a number of different organizations. For example, the Vermont Attorney General's office has a consumer hotline, consumer assistance program, and they issue from time to time alerts that are showing up in the state of Vermont. The Federal Trade Commission also has an alert system, as does Better Business Bureau and the Consumer Union. So signing up for these different alerts provides you with the opportunity to get the alerts as quickly as anybody out there would get them, and then you're aware and you can help spread the word to others. I've given you 10 tips, and the 10 tips are ways to avoid fraud. We also think it's important for you to take the information that you're learning and provide that information to others. Tell your friends, tell your family members, because the best way of spreading the word on fraud and how to protect yourself from fraud and criminals is to go word of mouth and provide that information to people you know. You too can be a fraud fighter. It's an important step to take in trying to protect everybody from becoming a victim of con artists.